Michigan continues to dominate its biggest and only rival. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Carter. Waits for it. Yes, caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison.
Brady gets terrific. Throws it, get it, touchdown, Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him, and a leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle, caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet, touchdown Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Sack. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue. Welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. I am Steve Deace. It was a fantastic weekend for Michigan athletics. We'll break all of that down with our good friend Michael Spath from Wolverine Digest and WTKA in Ann Arbor coming up here in the very next segment. But I want to begin with Michigan continuing to roll its biggest and only rival. Wait, who did you think I was talking about? Folks, we live in an age of wonders, where people can just deny reality, even when it's staring them right in the face, if not the mirror, and just declare their own reality because it's what they want or what they desire. I'd like to get a piece of that. So I'm taking one, a big, heaping green and white piece of it, as a matter of fact, because Michigan continues to dominate, at least as far as I am concerned, its biggest and only rival in Michigan State. Remember that Mel Tucker hire was gonna change things. Oh, and they gave him that huge assistant coach salary pool. Oh, yes, that was gonna change. That was gonna change the, what was it, 44-10, I believe was the final score back in November in Ann Arbor. Well, so far with that, one of the highest in the country salary pools, he has managed to hire the current Mark D'Antonio staff, a former Michigan State player who was coaching in high school, and two of his own assistants at Colorado. So there's that. Then there's hockey, where Michigan again beat Michigan State, swept them over the weekend, including winning the duel in the D on President's Day. Again, more domination over our biggest and only rival, Sparty. Michigan basketball a week ago, punking Tom Izzo, pretended to not even know who Isaiah Livers was. And don't look now, but depending on how Michigan finishes, Juwan Howard could potentially finish ahead of Tom Izzo in the Big Ten standings in year one. And those five-star recruits haven't even arrived yet. How many five stars is Michigan State getting? How about Foster Lawyer? Man, does he have a purpose other than just bouncing off of guys. I mean, man, what are y'all going to do when Cassius Winston, Xavier Tillman move on? I know what we're going to do. We're going to bring in a couple 5 stars, a couple high 4 stars, bring back a good portion of these guys from this year's team. That's what we're going to do. But man, isn't it great dominating a rivalry? It's great, especially when you only have one rival and it's your biggest rival and you're dominating them in multiple sports. And you know, the previous football coach stayed too long, strip mined the program on his way out the door, and you end up hiring a guy that had to lie to his own alumni and nobody else wanted to hire. It's a good time. Then you even throw in, you know, stuff that, you know, a lot of times we don't pay attention to, but we should pay more attention to. I mean, you look at Michigan baseball, #1 in the country right now. We'll get into that with Michael Spath here in a little bit. Michigan softball off to a great start. I thought they might be ranked #1 in the country too, given the amount of ranked teams they've already defeated this season. How's Michigan State doing in those sports? Yeah. Good times. Man, nothing like dominating your one and only rival. We'll break it all down with our good friend Michael Spath here in a moment. Steve Deace here. I just want to say a quick thank you to our new partner, Surfshark, who knows that our entire lives are spent online and you need to make sure that you're protected. Surfshark is a VPN service that makes online protection easy. Don't you hate it when you get an ad that pops up online and makes you think, hey, who's listening in to what I'm doing here? Well, Surfshark helps to get rid of those targeted ads. And Surfshark makes sure nobody is seeing your personal info without your permission and protects you from hackers who are after either your emails or your passwords. It's super easy to use too. Get Surfshark VPN at surfshark.deals/Michigan Podcast. That's surfshark.deals/Michigan Podcast. Enter promo code Michigan Podcast for 83% off and 1 extra month free. Promo code Michigan Podcast for 83% off and 1 extra month free. Try it out now and know that you are safe online. Surfshark VPN. Back here on Michigan Podcast, and I'm joined this week by one of my partners over at Wolverine Digest, host of the Michael Spath Show each weekday morning on WTKA in Ann Arbor. The one and only Michael Spath is joining us now. Good to have you back on the program, Michael. Happy birthday to you, by the way, brother. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I sound like a little bit of an egomaniac hosting the Michael Spath Show, but no, I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Michigan certainly had an outstanding weekend of sports and continued on yesterday on President's Day with a big victory for hockey. And who knows, maybe it'll continue on one more day tomorrow when Michigan goes to Piscataway, New Jersey, and takes on Rutgers and hopes to end their 17-game winning streak at home.
Well, since you started with the weekend overall, let's begin this week's conversation there. It really was quite a weekend. I mean, Michigan with, I think, its second biggest blowout win ever over Indiana. You got to go back to that game. I don't know if you remember that game in 1998. The Brian Ellerby team that went on to win the Big Ten tournament with Gerard Ward and Tractor Trailer and those guys beat Bob Knight, Indiana by 46 points. I believe this was the second worst loss Michigan has ever dealt the Hoosiers, and they've been playing since 1918. And it was an offensive clinic. And when you looked at the ball movement and the shot making, Michael, it looked like what we saw for 3 days in the Bahamas. Now, the question is, was that because Indiana, for reasons only Archie Miller knows, decided to hard edge on those ball screens and just let Xavier Simpson destroy him off the dribble? Was it because Michigan is really clicking now with Isaiah Livers fully back in the lineup, or a little bit of both?
Well, I'll tell you something that, borrowing this from football, that Devin Gardner, who joins me on Mondays for our Monday Morning Quarterback, always told me. He said, when you're a really good team, when you play teams that when you're superior to them, when you overmatch them, really good teams kill those opponents. Teams that are just kind of ho-hum will have a ho-hum result. Will beat a team by 2 or 3 and kind of struggle with them the whole game. He said, but the great teams are the ones that go out there and do exactly what they're supposed to do to bad competition. And I think we saw that with Michigan at Northwestern, a week ago Wednesday. And then we saw it against Indiana. I don't think Indiana's a terrible team. They've had a couple of nice wins this year. They're the in the lower third of the Big Ten, and they're deservedly in the lower third in a season where pretty much everybody is jockeying in that middle spot. But Michigan, I think Michigan's peaking. I think Michigan's playing its best basketball. I think what Isaiah Livers brings to this team, he brings more than just the ball distribution, the way that they can move pieces around. I think he brings a confidence and swagger to these guys that they know, like, hey, we've got that ace in the hole now. And you're seeing everybody from top on down playing their best basketball. And so certainly reason to be excited if you're a Michigan basketball fan going into tomorrow night's game against Rutgers.
Jon Teske and Xavier Simpson, with that win against the Hoosiers, now become the two winningest players in Michigan basketball history. And when you look at all of the great teams and players here, and then you look, of course, a lot of those guys, particularly in our era, would have gone early to the NBA, but still, when you look at what Jon Teske was, and I know you and I are kind of riding him right now for what he's doing on offense, and I think it's all deserved, by the way. But if you look at the prospect he was when he arrived here from Medina, Ohio, and when you look at Xavier Simpson, who was the instant fallback for John Beilein when he lost out on Cassius Winston, and you go back and watch that 2017 team where he was coming off the bench to spell Derek Walton, and you were just like holding on for dear life. No one would have ever guessed 4 years ago these two guys would go down as the winningest players in Michigan basketball history, Michael, but indeed they are.
Well, it's a testament to determination. It's a testament to constantly developing yourself. I mean, you're right. You go back to the freshman year for both these guys, and if you would have told me that these guys would be all conference players and two of the best at their positions over the last decade, I don't think that many people would have agreed with you. No one would have ever thought that in 3 or 4 years you'd have Xavier Simpson ranked right there up with Derek Walton and Darius Morris as the second best point guard behind Trey Burke of the last 15 years. And so again, real strong testament to what they have done. I think the Teske thing, I really hope that in these last 6 games of the regular season and then the Big Ten tournament, the postseason, I really hope he finds his groove and gets back to being a plus player for Michigan, because he's done so much. He's done so much development, especially as a sophomore and a junior in the first half of this season. He's done so much good that you don't want him to go out with all these bad memories. And I think typically when you give someone 5 years later, 10 years later, we tend to overlook a lot of the warts and we just look at what they accomplished. And I think Jon Teske will end up being someone that we really look back on and fondly of, and don't dog him for his lack of offense and don't dog him for his back to the basket game. We just appreciate where he came from and what he turned himself into. And unfortunately, it's, right in the moment, it's a little bit harder to see. But there's a reason. I mean, these guys stuck around for 4 years, and yes, a little bit of that is, nowhere to go. But, give them credit for doing that, because in today's college basketball, nobody sticks around for 4 years. Even the guys who are fringe players take off early or they transfer, something like that. And so I think these guys, very deservedly so, have earned that honor as the winningest players of all time.
So let me throw a crazy hypothesis at you, and you tell me if you think it has any merit or it's just dumb. All right? But we know when Juwan Howard arrived here, obviously, and you and I remember him in the Fab Five. He's a back-to-the-basket guy. That's what he was for 20 years in the NBA. That's what he coached in the NBA. And when he wanted to run the offense through Jon Teske early in the year, when you had Isaiah Livers healthy and in the lineup, and you could put so many different shot makers on the floor at once, we really saw Jon Teske thrive in that environment. And then once Livers got hurt and was gone for basically a month, and now you're not just running the offense through Jon Teske, meaning the ball is going inside out, but that you need him now to be one of your primary scorers now. And that's where we're seeing the dribble, backing you in, and then he doesn't have the touch or whatever, or fade away, and he can't finish at the rim that has marked his last few weeks. We haven't seen that much since Isaiah Livers came back. So I've got a crazy theory here. Knowing how hard Juwan Howard hit the recruiting trail right away, I think he called Josh Christopher faster than Rich Rod called Terrell Pryor back in 2008. Okay, and he told Terrell Pryor he was taking the Michigan job before he told the West Virginia team. All right, so is it possible that the reason we saw the offense featuring John Teske early on is because Juwan Howard wanted to send a message to the Isaiah Todds, Hunter Dickinsons, Walker Kesslers, who ended up going to North Carolina. But he wanted to send a message to those big men that he wanted to recruit right away, and that it was never really intended for this to go long term. But then Isaiah Livers got hurt. Their scoring options were limited. Brandon Johns was still developing. And now that Isaiah Livers is back, we're seeing a lot more of the kind of offense we saw early in the season where, yeah, it is going down to John Teske, but if he can't immediately turn around and make a move, we're not even seeing him take those threes now, even when he's open. So how much of this do you think was that this was also simultaneously a recruiting video as it was coaching the team early on?
I think that's a really good theory, but I've actually been told a different one. So I'm going to kind of like blow yours out of the water.
That's okay.
Steve.
That's all right.
But that's okay. I was speaking to someone recently who works for the basketball team, and I said, man, they've got to stop throwing the ball down low and having Teske take the first 2 shots or the 5 of the first 8, like we saw. I think it might have been against Michigan State where he took 5 of the first. No, it was against Northwestern. It
was Northwestern. He was 0 for 5. Yeah.
Yeah, and thankfully they were playing Northwestern, so they're only down like 8-4 at the first time out. And I said, man, what is that? I'm like, why did Juwan try to turn him into a back-to-the-basket player? And he said, honestly, he's like, because early on in the season or before the season when they had their conversations, Juwan asked John Teske what his goals were, and one of them is to play in the NBA. And he looked at his game, and he looked at it and said, look, I mean, while big men are much more likely to be face the basket type players in the NBA, and they're especially outside shooters. He said, if he's going to make it in the NBA as a 7-1 center with his level of athleticism, he's got to be someone that can score down low and not have to rely on just pick and roll and pick and roll and pick and roll and pick and pop. Mm-hmm. And he's like, he's got to be able to do something else. And so I think they put that back to the basket game in, hoping that he was going to develop that throughout the season and showcase to NBA scouts that, hey, if you throw the ball down low to me, we don't need to do it 15 times a game, but 5 to 8 times a game, I'm going to be able to make a move and score 60% of these shots and provide an offensive presence down low, and then I can still go out there and shoot a 30% clip from three-point land. Unfortunately, it's completely gone the other way, and he hasn't shown an ability to do it at all. So I think that's the biggest reason why he decided to do it. It probably has something to do with a little bit with the recruiting aspect of it too, and just showcasing those guys like, hey, we're going to feature the low post man. But I think a lot of it just had to do with John Teske's aspirations and Juwan Howard saying, hey, I mean, this is what I did in the NBA. And while doesn't figure prominently in the NBA anymore, I can help someone like John Teske develop that for his potential to play on the next level.
All right, let's fast forward ahead then. Michigan is 20-7 in the month of February since 2017. And the reason why that's noteworthy is, a lot of these conferences, including the Big Ten, are backlogging, conference tilts to get the higher hyped matchups later in the season. And so you're full bore into conference play. And there's not too many gimmies in the Big Ten the last few years. And so Michigan has thrived this time of year. We're seeing it now in Juwan Howard's first season, just like we saw the last few years under John Beilein. But when you look ahead, beginning Wednesday with Rutgers, Michigan only has 1 game left that is not a quad 1 game. And that's not unique, by the way, in the Big Ten. I mean, you look at Indiana's schedule, Iowa's schedule, almost everybody left in the Big Ten only has like 1 more game left that's not a quad 1 game. So where are they at right now from an NCAA tournament perspective in your view? How many more wins do you think they need here's the question with that too, because whenever that gets asked, remember, the committee is not choosing teams in a vacuum. They're not choosing they're not choosing the best at-large teams, but the most deserving, how they measure up against one another. So where do you think Michigan needs to be going into Indianapolis in the Big Ten tournament, Michael, so that they're automatically in? They're not being compared with anybody else in terms of being a selection, but being seeded. Do you think 2 more wins, 18 would do it? 3 more, 19? What do you think?
I think 2 more wins, and they're absolutely in the NCAA tournament, regardless of what they do in the Big Ten tournament. I think if you if you were to go 2-5 in your last 7, including the first game of the Big Ten tournament, it would not look good. But 2 more wins on this schedule, and I think they're in a good place. If they go 3-3 in these next 6, going into the Big Ten tournament, they can get one. They can win both of their home games that they have left, and they can steal one on the road. Probably, Purdue or maybe Rutgers on Wednesday night. Ohio State presents an opportunity, although Ohio State's been playing, better basketball of late. They can get a 3-3 record. I think that they kind of lock themselves in as like a 7 seed on the low end. And so it's really, honestly, to me, I think it's just about seeding at this point. I don't think unless Michigan were just completely drop the ball, go 1-5, and then lose their first game in the Big Ten tournament, I think it's all about seeding. I think at the low end, Michigan's a 9 seed. I think at the high end, you give me like a 5-1 mark and win a game in the Big Ten tournament, they could probably get up to a 5 seed. But they're kind of probably in that 7-6 seed. I think they want to stay away from the 8-9 matchup because that second round matchup is against the number 1 seed. Mm-hmm. And while there's, they say there's a lot of parity in college basketball, I do think that the teams vying for number 1 seeds right now all look pretty good. Although I'd love to get San Diego State in a second round matchup. But yeah, I think you can, if you can win. Out of these next 7 games, you're guaranteed 7. You got 6 regular season, 1 Big Ten tournament. So these next 7 games, you give me 3 wins from Michigan in those 7, and I think you're probably at worst an 8 seed, maybe a 7 seed. You go 4-3, I think you're a 7. You go 5-2, and I think you're a 6 seed, and maybe even higher than that. And so I think Michigan's in a good spot, and I think as long as Isaiah Livers is healthy, which I know that Brandon Brown right now is at media availability, and I'd be curious what Juwan Howard is saying about Isaiah Livers. As long as he's healthy, I think this team really has extremely high potential the rest of the way. I could see Michigan moving up a full seed line because of Isaiah Livers' injury, depending on how they finish, because their body of work, even down to points allowed, points per possession, it is a totally different basketball team. Their statistical profile, it's 2 different teams with him in and not in the lineup, which kind of brings us, I guess, in a way to hockey, because when I hear you talking about Michigan getting up to a 5 seed, I'd rather be a 6 seed. Because I think I think it's a weak slate of number 1 seeds, which means I think it's a really weak slate of 2 and 3 seeds this year in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. And I think hockey's kind of in a similar thing where. Yeah, maybe listen. If you can win a Big Ten title, particularly with the way they started, you take it, right? You do. But with the pairwise rankings and their version of the RPI and everything else, that convoluted system, they might even be better off finishing second in the Big Ten, beating up on Wisconsin a couple of times in that opening round of the Big Ten tournament, and helping their NCAA tournament profile. So is this kind of a repeat of what we saw in 2018? They started even worse than they did in 2018, but remember that team got off to a slow start, then won an incredible run after the first of the year, all the way to the Frozen Four. Could we see this year's Michigan hockey team repeat that? I think when you get to the NCAA tournament in college hockey, anything is possible. I mean, we've seen, not this past year, but, for a 3-year stretch, I believe, a 4 seed, which there's only 16 teams in the NCAA tournament, so a 4 seed is as low as you go. That's like a 16 seed in the basketball. We saw 3 straight years of the 4 seed win the NCAA tournament and upset a number 1 team en route to get there. So, yeah, I think anything is possible if you can get in. And I really like the way this team is playing. I mean, Strauss-Mann, if you watch Monday night's game against Michigan State for the duel in the D, he was outstanding in the second period. He made a couple of saves that I don't watch SportsCenter anymore, but they had to have been SportsCenter, top 10, because as good as you're going to see him diving across the crease and throwing his stick out there and his stick swatting it away as the puck is clearly going in the net. So he's playing at a really high level. They're getting great defensive play overall, and their offense has come alive. And you could see it, but they're not in the NCAA tournament right now. I mean, as hot as they've been, 8-1-1 over the last 10, they have considerable work still to do. They got to win 3 out of their final 4 games. So that means either sweeping Notre Dame or sweeping Minnesota and splitting with the other team. And then they need to take a first round series. I agree with you. I think they'd almost be better off if they go 3-1 their next 4. Depending on what Minnesota does, I think if they finish as the 2 seed, and then they got Wisconsin in that opening round and took them in 2 games, and I think they'd be a lock to go into the tournament. I don't know that they need to get up to a 3 seed, although it's obviously a little bit more ideal. I think they just got to avoid North Dakota. North Dakota is the best team in college hockey this year. As long as they're not the 16 seed and North Dakota is the 1 seed overall, they should be in a really good place. But it's been fun to watch the second half of the season. I know that we'll have Noel Pearson on the show on Wednesday to talk about it, and looking forward to getting his thoughts on why this team is playing as well as it is. But to sweep Michigan State in hockey on Friday and then Monday, coupled with the fact that they beat Michigan State in basketball just 2 weeks ago, it's been a nice little run here for the Maize and Blue over their in-state rival.
And then finally, we've got to discuss, if for no other reason, that it just turns our thoughts to warmer weather, hopefully just around the corner. But baseball and softball, with the weekends that or the starts that they have had, Michigan baseball ranked number 1 for the first time in over 40 years, for the first time ever in Baseball America magazine. I cannot remember the last time a Big Ten team was ever ranked number 1 in college baseball, but beating Vanderbilt, ranked number 1, Arizona State ranked number 3. Hey, that win over Cal Poly is legit, because Cal Poly also beat Vanderbilt too. Had a bit of a letdown effort against UConn, but with that kind of a start, off ranked number 1 after being in the preseason top 10 after last year's run all the way to Omaha in the final game of the College World Series. The Michigan softball team, I was kind of surprised they only went up to number 6 given the start that they have had. They've beaten several ranked teams already as well. So it could be a pretty fun spring and summer there around your neck of the woods. And I would not rule out, I know it sounds nuts, but I wouldn't rule out both of those teams hosting super regionals, given how strong they have started, what their non-conference resumes look like. And if they were to both be strong in the Big Ten, I mean, that would be absolutely insane if that were to happen, Mike.
Well, I'll tell you what, I remember when Michigan baseball hosted a regional during the Rich Maloney era, and it was as exciting as a time as Ann Arbor has seen in the spring. And then you look at what softball has done and how they've transformed their stadium from all their success the last 2 decades. And, they'll put 4,000, 5,000 people in those stands, and it'll be a standing room only. And I've heard that they want to, they could take the indoor practice facility there and put like kind of a upstairs patio up there and let people look over both of the stadiums. I mean, yeah, it's very cool to see, because even as great a success as softball has had, it's still relatively unexpected because of the warm weather nature of the sport, right? Mm-hmm. And Hutch has been dominating for 2 decades now, and certainly, this looks like another one of her very strong teams. And then baseball, God, I would love to see a regional and super regional. And I think for that to happen, it needs something like what Michigan did a year ago and then what's done to start the season. It needs name recognition. It needs to get the benefit of the doubt from the committee and benefit of the doubt from the voters all throughout the season. And they're not going to go 40-5 during the regular season. I mean, they're going to have some losses. They're probably going to be an inexplicable loss in there here and there. Like you said, the game against UConn, and I was talking to one of their coaches, and he said, look, by that point, we're on our 4th pitcher. We don't really know, or so early in the season, who your number 4 pitcher is. And so he's like, it just kind of got away from us pretty early on. And that's going to happen when you don't get, a ton of time with these guys to really prepare them. But it's incredibly exciting. And I think the other thing that it did with them beating those 3 teams and rising to number 1 is it immediately recaptured the fan base. I asked this question last week, how many people were planning on watching or paying attention to baseball early on, and a lot of people said, hey, it was really cool what they did, and I'll come pay attention in April or something like that. And then they get up to number 1, and it seemed like overnight, all the bandwagon fans, just the regular guys, like everybody kind of jumped back on board immediately. So unfortunately, they don't get to play games in February or early March in Ann Arbor. It's going to take a little while, but I think they're going to have a lot more attention, and we're hoping to capitalize off that a little bit and have Chris Fetter and Nick Schnabel and some of their assistant coaches join us on a regular basis on Inside the Huddle.
Well, if you're a baseball fan there in southeastern Michigan and knowing that the Tigers are still not planning to be competitive until 2021, and given the start this Michigan baseball team has had and how they finished last year, if you want to get out and enjoy some spring and warm weather there in the state of Michigan here coming up in about a month or so, that might be a far better bet than heading down to Comerica Park. Just my 2 cents. Michael, good to have you with us as always, man. Happy birthday again, and we'll talk to you next week.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Don't forget, you can stay up to date with everything we talk about here on Michigan Podcast in between episodes by visiting our website at WolverineDigest.com. Again, that's WolverineDigest.com. Myself, Michael Spath, and Brandon Brown keep you up to date each and every day on everything trending and happening with the Maize and Blue. So again, if you want to stay up to date on those Michigan Wolverines, go to WolverineDigest.com. Again, that's WolverineDigest.com. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, do you think John Beilein regrets leaving Michigan for the NBA? 79% of you said yes. And a quick commentary on that. I mean, I love Coach B, and he did a tremendous job here. But this is going to go down as one of the worst and most reactionary basketball coaching decisions in recent memory. You leave a program you have humming. You've got it humming right now. I mean, you are the basketball Bo Schembechler. You are canonized. And you're so frustrated by the likes of Jordan Poole that you decide to leave and go coach in a league full of Jordan Pooles. And for one of the worst franchises and owners in that league. And the only thing that he's made any news whatsoever in his first year until now, when the reports came out that he may not survive the season, and if he does, he's a one and done, pardon the pun, is you've got to defend yourself against unintended racism charges. I mean, that's just, man, the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the septic tank, man. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, sometimes, and don't get me, Stevie's making all that money. He was a multi-millionaire at Michigan, making over $4 million a year, guys. I mean, over the course of the 13 years he coached here, he probably made $25 million. John Beilein wasn't wondering where his next meal was coming from. John Beilein wasn't like, man, I wish I could take my wife on a cruise. Okay, he was a multi-millionaire. And it just goes to show that chasing the lights and the next level isn't always what it's cracked up to be. Just really sad for Coach B and the way that whole thing has turned out. But I will take least surprising news ever for $1,000, Alex. I mean, if you really thought this ever was going to work, you haven't watched the NBA for more than 10 minutes in your life. That brings us to this week's question of the week from Kevin J. Hannon. Can we please refrain from propping up U of M, meaning football, until the season begins again? Until you prove it on the field, what's on paper doesn't mean a thing. I don't know who's propping them up. I mean, at Wolverine Digest, we think they're going to lose at least 3 games. So, well, 2, because they only play an 11-game season now. So we think they're only going to lose. We think they're going to lose at least 2 games out of their 11 and not win the Big Ten again. So, I mean, I can't speak for others. Now, there's good players and good, position groups on the team, Kevin, and we're going to point that out, but we're not propping them up. None of us think they're winning the Big Ten or doing anything special this year. So that would not be our site, and certainly not this show. I am in total prove it mode, man. I've been in prove it mode for a while, but I have got to stick my fingers through the nail-scarred hands of Jim Harbaugh now. That's where I'm at. Like I'm not taking anything on faith. Nothing. I mean, nothing. I mean, I won't even, if they didn't have the names in the back of the jerseys, I wouldn't take the roster on faith. Nothing. Everything has to be absolutely spelled out as plainly as possible, or it didn't happen, as far as I'm concerned, with Michigan football. That'll do it for this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Don't forget, you can read our stuff every day at WolverineDigest.com and keep up with what we think is going on with the Maize and Blue. You can also follow me on Twitter for the same, at Michigan Podcast. Please consider liking, subscribing, 5-star reviewing, wherever is relevant, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or YouTube. Please, the more of you that do that, the more that helps us to reach more Michigan fans. Please, and let all the Michigan fans know about what we're doing here at Michigan Podcast as well. Until next time, go Blue.